Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's webinar on how to send SMS and email notifications using triggered actions. My name is Ned. I am a technical evangelist here at Caspio, and I hope that you will enjoy today's presentation. Let's take a look at the agenda first. I do have a couple of exciting announcements to make, so we'll take a look at those first. Then we'll dive into the main event of today's webinar, looking at example use cases and implementation of the triggers. This portion of the webinar will be presented by Jason Johnson, who is the Manager of User Education at Caspio, and he will be giving us a high-level overview of how to configure triggers and how it could be possible to incorporate them into various other projects. Lastly, as always, we'll open up the line for questions at the end. If you end up having any questions along the way, please use the questions window and either myself or somebody from our team will get back to you. Note that today's webinar is being recorded and we will email you the link to the presentation and also make the video available on our YouTube channel. So let's take a look at the first announcement. We have launched a 2-day on-site training program here in Santa Clara, and thus far we have received a tremendous amount of positive feedback from our customers. It really is the fastest way to learn how to use Caspio, and you'll be mastering many of the Caspio fundamentals by engaging in group and individual exercises. Throughout the 2-day program, you'll go through the process of learning best practices around application planning and Caspio features, and you'll have the opportunity to speak to Jason, so you'll definitely be in good hands. And you'll be able to bounce some ideas by Jason to find out if some of your other application projects could potentially be a good fit. Next announcement, for which I'm very excited about, is our upcoming No Code User Conference. The conference will take place here in Santa Clara, and it will be from October 15th until the 17th. The first day of the conference will be the training bootcamp designed for the new users to the platform to get an introduction to Caspio and the fundamental concepts needed to build applications. And also for advanced users looking to take their Caspio skills and applications to the next level. October 16th through 17th will be our user conference portion, and it will consist of keynote speeches from industry leaders, presentations from Caspio experts and fellow Caspio users, detailed product roadmap, technical demonstrations of the platform, and much more. If you'd like to get more information on the user conference, please fill out the survey at the end of the webinar and we will email you more information. And on behalf of the Caspio team, we hope to see you all there. For my third and final announcement, I'd like to mention what our product team is working on to deliver to our customers before the end of the year. As with any other product release, please be aware that the release of these features is not set in stone, as there are many factors that could impact deliverability of the features. First one that I have on my list is payment integration. This feature will allow us to connect to different payment gateways to process payments. It's pretty exciting when you think about all the different ways you'll now be able to monetize through Caspio applications. Next on the list is print to PDF in reports. Many of you have probably enabled the ability to download results in reports. Well, on the same screen where you enable download results, you'll now have the option to print to PDF, which will transpose the data onto a printable PDF document. Next is calculations in submission forms. This feature will allow us to see computed values on the forms before the submission is made. And last but not least is schedule-based triggers. Many of you have been asking about it, and I'm happy to announce that it will soon make its way to the platform. This feature will allow us to send an email or SMS based on the date field. So, for example, if you want to notify customers a week before their account expires, you'll now be able to do something like that. We'll also have other smaller features and enhancements this year, but I just wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the more exciting ones. Now let's take a look at some of the use case examples that we put together for today's presentation. First one is the user registration with verification, where we verify the user based on a PIN number. Next is help desk ticketing, where we trigger an email based on the department and to send an SMS if the request is marked as urgent. And last is inventory management, where we send an email based on quantity ordered. Now let me go ahead and turn the presentation over to Jason, who will be guiding us on how to set up the necessary triggers for each of these use cases.
Thank you, Ned. And hello, everyone. My name is Jason Johnson. I'm the manager of user education here at Caspio. In October of 2017, we had initially released our triggered actions feature. These triggered actions allow data manipulation and calculations based on some specific table level events and allowed you to construct application logic using a visual interface. Today, I'm going to be walking you through the 3 different use cases Ned just mentioned using the newly released email and SMS triggered actions in Caspio 12.0. In the interest of time, I'm going to be focusing this implementation demo portion of the webinar on the new email and SMS features and not as much on general trigger behaviors. For anyone looking for a refresh though on trigger behaviors and a deeper dive into these triggered actions, we will be offering some live online training this coming Friday, May 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific, and next Friday, May 25th at 8 a.m. Pacific. So now with that, let me go ahead and get into the use cases. So our first use case that we'll be reviewing, as Ned had mentioned, is going to be making use of a user registration process. Now this is going to be making use of using the new notification option as a part of a workflow. So the workflow is such: a user comes in and registers, and on registration, they will actually get a random PIN. Once they submit their registration, this PIN will be sent to them via SMS. User will be prompted to enter the PIN, and then the registration can be completed. So let's just first take a look at the form itself. Now, this is a very basic web form, but the key point to point out is since I'm using an SMS, I do need to make sure that my phone number field is required. So the first step here that I want to step you through, though, is I want to build out that individual trigger. Now, I've built this trigger once before, but let's go ahead and build a brand new one so we can see how it works. Once the trigger is built, we'll then step through and demonstrate how that PIN number can be used. So in review, to start to build a new triggered action, you choose the table, and in this case, it's my registration table, and I choose new triggered action. Once this comes up, I now need to configure on what action I wish to fire this trigger. In our case here, we are looking to run this action on insert of data into the registration form. I now can choose my actions block, and I will be choosing the new send SMS action. I can drag and connect this. Now looking at this, the first thing I know, I need to have a to field, and I'm going to need to reference a field that's being inserted. As you can see, as of right now, I don't have access to any field, so I'm going to need to add a select statement. Now, the table I'm looking to get data from in this select statement is my data that is being inserted into the table, the data that is being submitted. I'm not going to have any where clause because at this point we're not doing anything conditional. So I can click on the gear for the select statement and remove the where. And I can take the block, and you'll see that I can select now my phone number field. Now that I've selected that, I can configure the body of the message. So I can type in a general greeting and use the insert tool here to insert the values. These are going to be values from the data being submitted. So I could say, hello, please enter the following PIN. And then insert the PIN value. It's as simple as something as this. We will now validate our very basic trigger. It validates. To review what we have just built, we're saying on insert of data into the registration table, I want to send an SMS to the phone number that is being provided on the submission form with a body message that will basically repeat the name they entered and get the auto value PIN. Let me quick save this trigger, and then let's take a look at the data page itself and then run the test just to see how it behaves. So we'll save this as PIN confirmation, and we'll save this. Now let's take a look at the construction of the initial data page, just so I can walk you through the general workflow. Like I said, this triggered action with the SMS is part of the workflow. So if we take a look at the data page itself, what I've done is I have a field in the table called auto value pin. This is set to be unique in the table, so every user will get a unique value. I've set this form element to an auto value, which will give me an 8-digit number only. I could set it to characters and digits if I wished. This is what is going to be sent to the user. As soon as we submit, I have it forwarding to a complete registration form. That form actually is using an authentication that will prompt the user to enter the PIN. So let's run through and submit some data and just see how it behaves. So I enter in my form. I need to make sure I enter in a number, so it sends the text to it, and finalize this and hit submit. And you see it's now asking me for what that PIN number may be. And I just wait to receive my text message. And once I get it, I need to type in the PIN number provided. I log in, and it now allows me to complete my registration. Now, in the use case that I just showed, this is a one-off use case. Many times people will ask, well, what if I want to resend the PIN or do things of that nature? I designed this use case just to show that this is a possibility to send that PIN. In our training that we go in on Friday, we'll deep dive into some modifications to this use case and answer any questions you have regarding it. So what I want to do next is I want to step into our use cases that are going to make use of a little more conditional type behaviors of our triggers. So first, we are going to look at a general help desk ticketing type application. The design of this is going to be a user will submit a ticket, and on submission, they will choose which department this ticket belongs to. In my case here, I have 3 different departments. I have a support department, an IT department, and an HR department. On submission, an email will be sent to whatever that department email alias is, and I'll show that in the table in a moment. Now, additionally, we're going to have a behavior that the user on submission of the ticket can flag this ticket as urgent. If they do so, the email is still sent to the department in general, so everyone is notified there's a new ticket. But also, we want to send an SMS alert to whoever the department team lead or supervisor or manager may be. Now, this first behavior you see, sending the email to the department alias, this could be accomplished as well if you're using our standard auto emails. The benefit of using it in this case is I can actually send it conditionally. I could, if I wanted to configure this, send the email or not. Also, this is going to be table-based, so I don't have to make use of maybe cascading elements or virtual fields at all. So let's take a look at this application, step through the table design, and then go through and create each of these actions to define the trigger. So look at the app overview. Let's take a look at the tables involved. Now in this case, I'm going to have 3 different tables. The first table I have is a department table. In the department table, I have very general information. I have the department ID. I'm going to have actually the name of the department and then just the department email. As I said, this is an email alias, so similar to anyone in your organization in the IT team, all of them will get that email. Anyone under HR or, as you see, anyone under support. Then my next table that's going to be used in this case is going to be my actual employee table. In the employee table, I'll define which department each employee belongs to, so in that sense, their role. And then also I have a yes/no field, as you'll see, to define whether or not they're a supervisor. So as we see, I have Jason and John here. They're both part of the IT department, but Jason is flagged as the supervisor. The purpose of this is when a submission ticket is flagged as urgent, only Jason in IT should get the text message. John should not. And then our final table will be obviously the ticket table. This is going to be the table that we're going to use to define the trigger in. Ticket table will have the department information and the ticket information itself. So let's go ahead and step through creating that triggered action. So once again, I have a test trigger that I built previous, but we're going to build this one from scratch. We're going to build it from the beginning. So like any trigger, your first question you need to ask is, on what action do I wish to have this trigger execute? Right now, I'm sticking with just insert. We could use others. So on insert of data to the ticket table, I wish to, our first part we want to look at is let's send that department email. So we choose the actions menu option, select the send email block, click and drag that and allow that to connect. You'll see in my send email, I do have an option to send this email as plain text or as HTML. For now, I will leave this as plain text. First thing I need to look at is where will this email be coming from? So in my case, I have a static address. I'll say admin@caspio.com. Next, who is this going to go to? Well, I know I need it go to the department email, so it's going to be choosing from a field. Once again, I see I do not have access to that. So I'm going to need to add a select statement. I also know I'm going to need to be able to look at what department this is being assigned on submission. So my initial select statement will need to look at the inserted table, the data being submitted. In this case, once again, we're not going to have a conditional to send this email. If you did wish to define some sort of condition to send or not send the email to the department, that could be defined. But I do know at this point, I need to join this to my department table. So what I'm going to do is select the gearbox in the select statement, remove the where, and add a join. I can then take this piece that was added, click the delete to remove it. We'll see now it defaulted. I have my department. Joining by in my inserted data, I have department assigned. Joining to my department ID. Now that I've defined this, I can go to my to field, and what you will see is in the dropdown, I now have access to the department email. I can then configure my subject line and say new ticket created. And maybe I wish to use the insert in the submission to grab the new ticket ID. And then I could put information regarding the ticket. A new ticket has been created for, and I could maybe put the department name. As you can see in now both the body and in the subject, I have access to the information regarding the ticket, and since I did a join to the department, information regarding the department. And I could go through and add whatever initial information I want as well. I could say ticket description, and then maybe pull from the ticket description. So in the email, they have a general idea of what it is. So at this point, I've actually created a behavior that on insert of data to the ticket table, I will be sending an email to whatever department was defined, selected from the inserted side. Now, the reason I had to do the join is I did not define the email in the inserted data, in the data being submitted. I just choose which department it is. So I join that data being inserted to the department to have access to the email. Next, let's just validate to make sure there's not any errors. As we see, that is set. Now we need to actually account for that conditional behavior of sending the SMS if it is set to urgent. Now, in this case, we don't want to build a new triggered action. We just want to add another action block to this existing trigger. So I choose from actions, and then I choose send SMS. Drop this in. And once again, looking, who is this going to be going to? Well, I know this will be going to the phone number field of whoever is in the employee table. Once again, you see I do not have access to any fields at this point. So we need to go through a very similar exercise as we did with the email. I'm going to add a select statement. Now, I do need to join to, once again, the inserted table because I need to compare any of these joins from the data being inserted or submitted. In this case, we will have a where clause, and we'll configure that in a moment. So first, let's add our join. We will be joining at this point to the employee table. So when I add it, defaults. The reason it's defaulting to departments because that's the top of my list. I'm going to choose employees. And then I need to choose the appropriate fields. So I need to make sure I'm joining to department assigned to employee department. At this point, let's just quickly jump to the to because you will see I now have access to the phone number. Now I could configure my message, but first I want to make sure that my where clause is configured correctly. I need to account for two things. One, I need to make sure that this priority is actually set to urgent. And two, I only want this SMS to go to those where the employee supervisor field is checked. So since I have two clauses, I'll need to add some logic to my where, which is an and block. I can drop this in, and you'll see when I insert it, it'll actually move the other block inside of it. Now I'm just going to duplicate this internal field so I don't have to grab some more pieces. And let's first configure that priority option. So I choose on the data being submitted, so the inserted priority needs equal to, I need a text value, so I can type in the value of urgent. With enter in urgent. So we've now accounted for the flagging on submission of urgent. We now need to set this to our employee supervisors equal to checked. In this case, I'm going to choose my logic field and add true. I've now configured logic. The last piece of this is be configure my message body. And I could say ticket ID flagged as urgent. So validate this trigger. And what we've created now is the triggered action that we'll go through and to quickly review our workflow. On submission of the ticket, we choose a department and an email set to the department. That is going to be this top portion that we've set here. So on insert to the tickets, we will send to the appropriate department. And then we accounted for if the urgent box is checked, only send the SMS to the department lead. That will be controlled via this where clause. This portion will not run. If these two are not true, this SMS will not send. So let's go ahead and save this trigger. And save. So for the final use case, I want to step you through an inventory system. Now, for any of you that had attended the previous webinar in October on the release of triggers or have watched any of the videos on them, previously I had built a triggered action that was designed that when an inventory order or invoice was created and someone specified a quantity, I had it deduct that quantity from an item or inventory table appropriately. So if I had 1,000 on hand and I ordered 500, after the submission there'd only be 500 remaining on hand in the other table. We had also built a behavior at that time that if, for example, I created an order that I order 500 of a product, and on hand of that product there was only 400, it would flag it as a back order. If it went through otherwise, if I ordered 500 and on hand was 700, it didn't flag it. What we'd like to do though is we'd like to take that existing trigger and add a behavior to it. We now want, when this is set to back order, I want to generate an email to both the customer and the inventory manager or inventory team to let them know this product is on back order. The customer will get an email saying, we apologize, this order is on back order. Inventory manager will get an email saying, you need to order more of product, whatever. Now, on the other hand, if the order can be fulfilled, there's enough on hand to fulfill that order, I want the customer to get a different email letting them know that this order is going to be processed. Now, what this is showing is, one, I'm going to be comparing values in a different table to then send two different emails conditionally based on what that value is. And then I'll send an additional email to the inventory team. So let's go ahead and step through how we create that. So we're going to jump over to our inventory option and look at the tables. So in this case, I have a few different tables because I had a rather elaborate trigger built previous. Now, what I want to do here, though, is I'm going to add a behavior to an existing trigger. Many of you may have some triggers you built and you've been waiting for this SMS email. So I'm going to show a couple best practices in adding this to it. So let's go under More and Triggered Actions for our invoice. Now, when it comes up, I have a few different triggers that are built here. The one we're going to focus on is the one on insert. Now, I do not want to just right away edit my existing trigger that's working just fine for the off chance that maybe I break it. So what I would recommend to do the first time through is actually in testing is duplicate the existing trigger, and we'll just call this version 2. And we're going to edit a copy of that. I can always then, if this functions, disable this trigger and enable the other. So let's edit this initial one. Now, as you'll see when this comes up, I have quite a few actions running already in this trigger. The one thing I want to make sure I do is I want to go through and disable all the existing actions before I add any new actions. The reason is I know all these test through just fine. I don't want to add some additional actions and possibly have conflicts. I want to test them one at a time. So what I can go through and do is disable each of these other actions. So I'm going to do that first before we add our new actions. Now that I've disabled them, I'm going to come in. Now we can add our new actions. And once again, this is going to be executing on insert. The first action I want to add is the condition where an item is, I order X amount, and that's greater than what I currently have on hand. I want to generate an email to the customer letting them know this order is on back order. And perhaps maybe I have a web page or something I wish to be able to give them to go check the status. I want to provide that in the email as well. So first, we choose the actions block, and we're going to select the send email block again, drag this in, and I'll start it at the top. In a quick refresher, just to remind you, triggered actions do run hierarchy top down. I can always move these around. For right now, I'm just building this trigger in so that I can test this individual email trigger. So let's go through our comparable exercise we did before. Where will this be coming from? Possibly I just have this once again from admin@caspio.com. Who is this going to go to? This needs to go to the customer. So I know I'm going to actually have access to the customer table in this. So let's add the to field. Once again, no access to it yet. I want to get the information that's being inserted, and I need to join that to the customer table. Now, I also know that I'll need a where clause at some point to do a comparison of items. So let's go through and configure each of those. First, I add my select statement. And I'm going to be getting data from the inserted table. There's my where clause, which we will configure at the end. But next, I need to create my join. Add my join. And I'm looking to join to the customer table, the inserted data to the customer table. The purpose of this is so that I can get the email address of whoever just ordered this new invoice. So joining by the data being inserted customer ID to the customer table's customer ID then gives me access here to the customer's email address. Next, I need to configure my where clause. I need to compare my inserted quantity ordered. If it is greater than, and let's insert a data field, this needs to be greater than the item on hand. So in my inventory table, my item table in this case. And as you can see right now from my drop down, I don't have access to the item table, so that tells me I need to add a join. I'll then specify here my join is going to be to the items table. And I need to compare the inserted item ID so inserted item ID to the item ID in the items table. Now that I've done that, I have access in my comparison where clause to my items table to get the inventory on hand. So what we have is if the amount I'm ordering is more than what we have on hand, this SMS is going to generate. So now we can configure once again our message. So say invoice, and we'll just say invoice ID back ordered. And we can then draft our message. Hello, enter their name, and I have access to their first name because of my join. And then we could come in and just give me information. Your recent order is on back order. Please check www.inventorystatus.com. And then I could form if I wanted some sort of a query string or something at this point, but just direct them to a website for more info. We'll keep this very basic. I have access to, in my insert, as you see, I have access to all the data that's being submitted. I have access to the customer data, and I have access to the inventory table, or the item table in this case. You could add any of that information you want into that message. So before we go through to try to configure any of the others, let's just validate this part to make sure there's no errors with this. So we choose validate. Once that validates correctly, I know that this trigger is going to work. So the next portion I want to account for is I need to send an email to my warehouse team or inventory team. Now I could go through reconfiguring this whole thing. In the interest of time, what I'm going to do is just duplicate this because my general behavior is the same. What we're looking at in this is I still want to send this email on the same where condition, so where the quantity order is greater than that. What really is changing at this point is I'm not sending it to the customer anymore. I'm sending it likely to a static address. So let's say this is inventory manager at Caspio.com. I could then change the status of my message itself. Likely I don't want to have a message saying, move my trigger out of there. I don't want to break that. So I want to go through and then configure my status in my message or something here slightly different. So maybe I rewrite my message saying, please reorder product. And then I have from my item table, I can join in my item. I could say item name. And I can provide whatever additional information, once again, into this email. And let's just see. So we've sent now an email that will go to the inventory manager. Now, at this point, I didn't use any of the customer information here, so I could remove the join, but likely I want to put in who the customer is and the invoice ID. But I think you get the idea here of being able to add those fields. So at this point, we need to add one more. I need to account for, though, letting the customer know if the order goes through. So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate my existing customer email. And in this case, the change of it will be the body of the email, subject, and my logic will change. I'm no longer looking to have this in the where clause only go when it's greater than. I want it to be when it is less than or equal. So if I have enough on hand, I just want to let the customer know we are ordering, your order is being processed. It's processing is saying on back order is being processed. And at that point, I've now accounted for, to walk through each of these, I have an email set up that when the quantity ordered is greater than what we have on hand, for a back order condition, the customer gets one email. If it is not back ordered, if it's on hand, the customer gets a different email. So we're sending a conditional email in one case or the other by comparing a value being entered on submission to the value in another table. And then also I have an email being sent conditionally to the warehouse team only if the quantity order is not on hand. So if I'm trying to order it and it's a back order case, that's the only time they will get it. To compare this to our current auto emails, our auto emails, when you hit submit, will send no matter what. This case here with the warehouse only sends when this condition is true. Otherwise, nothing is sent to the warehouse. The customer is actually then getting a conditional email of one or the other. So I can go ahead and save this. And I've already named it, so that's why it's saved. And with that, I'd like to actually thank everybody for attending today. We have additional resources, as you can see up on the screen. If you're looking for more information, take a look at contacting your account rep for some consultations. Our step-by-step videos created by Ned are a great resource, and then our how-to online documentation. If you have additional questions or want to deep dive at all into some things, please attend upcoming trainings. And once again, please fill out the survey that we'll be sending out at the end. It helps us actually refine these webinars, and it'll help us follow up with you on any issues you may have questions. But on behalf of myself, Ned, and the rest of the Caspio team, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and have a great day. And we're hoping to work with you soon.